Today we are going to discuss the fall of Troy, part 1. Now, epics. Epics, do you know what do you understand by the word called epics? So, epics are long poems that relate the deeds of a great national hero or a great national war. They often tell of a nation's early history. They may be composed and sung or recited for many years before they are actually written down. The two famous Sanskrit epics are the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. You must be knowing about Ramayana and the Mahabharata. And the two great epics of European literature written in ancient Greek are Iliad and Odyssey. So please underline that ancient Greek literature, Iliad and Odyssey. Just as in Indian literature, we go back to stories from the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. So, in the literature of Western countries, they go back to the Iliad and Odyssey. And just as the children all over India know the names of stories of Ram and Sita, Yudhishthira and Arjuna, and Draupadi, so children in Western countries know the names of Hector, Odysseus, and Achilles and Helen of Troy. Helen of Troy, who was most beautiful woman in the world, and because of whom the Greek and Trojans fought for 10 long years. And that is why, this story is all about the fall of Troy. This story is all about the war between the Greek and the Trojans. So as you can see here, we have two great epics in India, Ramayana and the Mahabharata. In European literature, it's known as Iliad and Odyssey with different name, right? So as you can see here, if you go back to the Western countries, their epics are Iliad and Odyssey, and their main characters are Hector, Odysseus, and Achilles and Helen of Troy. Now, nobody knows for certain who the author of these early epics is. It is thought that they arose and developed with the nation itself and were handed down from singer to singer till perhaps one great poet gave their final form, that is, final version. It is believed that the Iliad and Odyssey were composed and recited by a blind poet named Homer. Please underline this. Homer was a blind poet, and he has given this. He has only composed and recited this poem Iliad and Odyssey. Who lived around 900 BCE, who wandered from Greek city or village to another, singing his poems to all who would receive him in their homes and give him hospitality. Hospitality means the friendly and generous reception, right? And BCE means before Common Era. So this wandering singer has been honored through the ages, not only in Greece but in all Europe as the father of European poetry. So again, one important thing, Homer was also known as the father of European poetry. The Iliad is the story of Elam or Troy, a rich trading city in Asia Minor near the narrow sea that leads to the Aegean to Black Sea. It was well situated both for commerce and agriculture. So it was used for this import and export for trading purpose. And in front of the city was the sea over which sailed the ships of Troy, carrying goods and grains. At the back rose the high peak of Mountain Ida, from which flowed many rivers and streams. The valleys among the hills were well watered and fertile. Well watered and fertile means very suitable for agriculture purpose, with corn growing in the fertile fields and cattle feeding on the rich grass of the meadows, while sheep fed on the slopes of the hills. Around the city, the Trojans had built a strong wall so that no enemy should attack them from the sea. The wall was so broad that the people could stand, sit, and walk on it. So here, stressing on the fact that the wall was too strong, people used to sit there and walk on that particular wall. The great gates stood open, and people could go to the seashore outside and come in as they pleased. But in time of war, the gates would be closed, and then the city was like a strong fortress. Fortress means a large, strong building or a group of buildings, quite safe from all attack protected by the walls surrounding it, as well as by the hills behind. Thus, the Troy was a strong city, strongly protected by its wall and strongly defended by its brave soldiers. But all the kings and heroes of Greece had declared war against Trojans. Why? Because Paris, who was Paris? He was a prince of Troy, had persuaded Helen. Helen was the wife of Greek king Menelaus to elope with him. Elope means to run away with him. So he had brought her to Troy. And the Greeks wanted to take revenge on Troy for the wrong done to Menelaus. They sailed to Troy and laid siege to the city. What is the meaning of siege? Means a military operation in which enemy forces surround a town or building. So laid siege to the city, and the Trojans too fought hard, and siege continued for 10 long years. The fighting went on daily, but the siege did not end. And on the other hand, the Greeks could not take the city, and the Trojans could not force them to sail away. Every day, the Trojans came out of their gates, and the Greeks came out of their tents and ships, and the fighting went on. Sometimes there were great battles between the two armies, and sometimes there were single fights between two great heroes. Sometimes the Trojans had the better of it, and sometimes the Greeks. But still, the fighting went on. So that was a long fight between Greek and the Trojans. And great heroes on both the sides were killed in the course of war. After leading the defense of his city for 9 years, the brave Hector was last killed by Achilles. Achilles, and whom none could resist. But Achilles himself was killed later on by a poisoned arrow that entered his head. So Achilles was not, he resist means to keep or stop yourself from doing something. So Hector was killed by Achilles, and Achilles was also killed by a poisoned arrow. Then only part of the body where he could be wounded. Still later, Paris himself was killed, and also by a poisoned arrow. The Trojans were tired of being shut up in their city, and the Greeks were longing to see their homes again. But still, the fighting went on. So there's still no fighting for the long 10 years. And they were very eager to go back to their homes to see their family members, but because of this war, they could not. That's the end of part 1, the fall of Troy. In the next part, we'll try to understand what next. What was the end part of the story, the fall of Troy. Thank you so much.